Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Spiritual well-being, I love the meaning, is about connection. So it's connecting with self. So having somebody there to help you connect with yourself, to understand what's happening within me.
Spirituality is about what gives us purpose to our lives. It's about our sources of meaning and hope, which in turn is intimately related to our connectedness to ourselves, to others, and to the world. Today's guest is Jenny Block, General Manager of Chaplaincy and Spiritual Care at BaptistCare in Sydney, a not-for-profit organisation who have been serving the aged and people living with disadvantages for over 80 years. We'll be discussing the importance of spiritual care and what that looks like when we're working with older adults in Australia. That's Jenny Block, along with my wife Kate and myself, Brett Ryan, for Focus on the Family, Australia. Well, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Jenny Block story. Before you got married, and then as you got married, and then how you got involved in this role in chaplaincy.
So I was brought up in Sydney. I was brought up in a Baptist church, Auburn Baptist Church, from day one. And I was baptised when I was 18. I remember that so clearly. A beautiful day. Biggest turning in my life was I was chosen to be a Rotary exchange student in Japan. So that was an amazing 12 months. I lived in Tokyo and went to school over there and lived with Japanese families. So that was a real turning point
Japanese?
for me. No.
Wow.
Had to learn it very quickly.
You're immersed.
Yes, immersed well and truly. So that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to get out there, if I can put it that way. It was a real turning point. Came back, did my teacher training. So went into teaching in private schools, so Christian community schools. That's where I met my husband, married. I have 4 children, and I now have 7 grandchildren.
Wow.
And so very, very busy. Did teaching, ended up pastoral care pastor in a large church, and then I ended up in chaplaincy. So for the last 14 years.
It's all about people.
Working, it is, including family.
Yes.
And so the last 14 years I've been working with BaptistCare in the chaplaincy space. Began as a chaplain and then was able to step into the management. And for the last 6.5 years, I've been working as a general manager.
I feel exhausted just listening to all of that.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing.
You hear the word chaplain, and a lot of people have this image of what a chaplain is.
Yes.
In your world, what is a chaplain?
Well, definitely the picture that we do have is, Father Mulcahy and working alongside people, but also doing the church services, loving people. And that really is still quite the picture that it is in many ways. But a lot of people still do think that a chaplain is something that is a Christian person that is there to pray, read the Bible and tell people about Jesus. In my organisation, we're a Christian organisation, so we certainly have the privilege and we're given permission to do that. But we also do spiritual care. So what is exciting about that is being able to be present to people whether they are Christian or not. And we need to find their trust in us. We need to be able to sit with them, hear their stories.
Build relationship.
And connect with them well and truly, be curious and build those relationships. It's a privileged role, it really is. Sometimes we're given permission to pray for them, sometimes not. We're able to sit with people whether they have got a faith, no faith, whether they say that they've got spirituality, whatever that is.
Right.
As a chaplain, we're there. We're outside of the church. That's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah. BaptistCare is quite broad, and obviously that is one entity in New South Wales and the ACT and where else?
We're in Western Australia
Australia as well.
So, yes, my team is across there.
But there's other Baptist organisations throughout this great nation of ours.
There is,
that
every state.
do very similar things, but also unique to what they do. And
Very
so it's
much.
not only in aged care. Where else do you
Aged
function?
care, so definitely aged care, social housing, which is really exciting. We've gone into that area. Community service, so we're in different refuges, women's centres. We have a chaplain that's in school. We also have chaplains, they're called civil chaplains, so they're in hospitals and prisons.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we go to other states. In Victoria, it's BaptistCare. They do a lot of other things, not only aged care, they do foster care. Then you go up to Queensland, where it's called Corinity. They do a lot of stuff in civil chaplaincy in particular, a lot of volunteers there. Then you have Northern Territory. You've got down in Tasmania as well. So, the BaptistCare family, BaptistCare Australia, it is a national organisation working in each state.
Wow. I mean, that's so fantastic, isn't it? So, I mean, often you look at sports teams even when we've actually had an interview with somebody who was a sports chaplain and how just years of just building relationship.
That's right.
Before ever talking about God, but they need to bring it up. Is that your experience?
In many ways it is. In the aged care space, it's a little bit different, especially if you're working in residential, because the chaplain, being a Christian chaplain, and it is a Christian organisation, so therefore the chaplains there will do Bible studies and will do the church services, and we'll be able to get ministers from other churches, around to be able to come in. But there still is so many people in aged care that don't have our faith.
Yeah.
So yes, it is that sitting with them, building that wonderful relationship. Aged care is very special though, because majority of them are in their 80s, 90s, even in their hundreds now.
Wow.
And majority of them have been brought up in church. They went to Sunday school.
Yeah.
So it's phenomenal. You'll be having this conversation and they've made it very clear that they're not interested in that. Don't come talk to me about that. But then within maybe the second conversation, they'll just go, I went to Sunday school. And it opens it up.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
And it's like, tell me about that. I'm curious.
When you were citing all the things that the various organisations and ministries around Australia, it just dawned on me that scripture in Matthew where it talks about, I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And then it went on to say, when did we see you do all those things? When did we do this? And basically the Father says, whatever you did to the least of these, you did it to me. And you're going to all those places, providing that service. It's a wonderful imagery that we all have a part to play, that we have to look out for those who are marginalised, those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And you're at the coalface. And as you said, the joy of coming alongside an elderly person, a mature age person, I like to say, and just to hear their story, it must be so fulfilling.
Amazing stories. Amazing. And as we know, the statistics, the research that they're doing on loneliness here in our Western world is horrendous. And I was even reading that they've done some research in America, and this isn't elderly, this is across the board.
Yeah.
They believe that 25% of people in America do not have a good friend. They don't have
believe it.
one.
I would believe it.
One. So
Isolation.
the isolation is terrible. So to have somebody, because we do at-home chaplaincy, not only residential but at home, to have somebody to knock on your door, like we've rung up and got permission to come, but to knock on the door and to come in and say, let me put the kettle on, and to sit down and, oh my gosh, look at the photos. Oh, look at your china cabinet. Let's talk about your china, your beautiful china or whatever it is. And it just opens up these amazing stories. And so often, they'll go, oh, okay, you can come. But by the time you're leaving, they're saying, you're coming back next week, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because of that connection.
Because I see you. You're a high value. We all need that.
Well, it's the cry of any heart is to be seen and known.
And to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what a beautiful thing to go into their home, in their space, and to actually be able to talk about all things that are important to them. That's beautiful.
And what I love doing is I will say, I'll put the kettle on and I'm able to look in their fridge and see how they're coping. I can even have a sneaky peek into their cupboards, and then I can let somebody know if they're not coping if there's no food and things like that in their cupboard. So just keeping an eye on that as well. I am a little bit like
so
that.
it becomes a crossover ministry to you're looking after their spiritual care and then somebody else will come in and take care of their physical needs.
Very much so, because we are doing that as well. So it's trying to do it very respectfully, of course,
yes,
but just keeping an eye on them, making sure that they're okay.
Now, I'm convinced, so I'm fully there, and I love the idea of someone coming alongside them. It's your gift of your presence. But what about some people would say, does it really make that much of a difference? What would you say to them?
Well, if they're saying that, I would probably be thinking you haven't been in crisis and experienced a chaplain.
Yeah.
I know that it was quite a few years ago that my daughter had a really bad accident and she was in hospital. She had to have surgery. I was falling apart because of my beautiful little girl. I was in church, but I hadn't had many visitors. I was quite a distance away from where I was living in hospital, and I was desperate for someone to talk to.
Yeah.
The chaplain came up and she handed a teddy bear to my daughter, and it was like, oh my gosh, someone to talk to. And she knew that I was of faith. She knew that I went to church, and she looked at me and she said, I gather you're okay, and walked away. And I actually learned that day that none of us are okay, whether we are in church or not in church, that we just needed someone. And that was the greatest learning thing for me at that moment, the need for someone just to pause. I needed someone to vent. I needed someone to just talk about my concerns and my doubts and what was and where was God in this. I just needed someone not to give me the answers. I just needed to talk. And so I have experienced being in crisis and not having someone.
Yeah.
It was an interesting assumption, wasn't it?
It was, very much. I needed someone to talk to that I could say things to that my church family I couldn't say to.
Yes.
Yeah. You're listening to Focus on the Family Australia, and we're talking to Jenny Block, the Senior Chaplain of BaptistCare.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
Well, welcome back, and we're speaking to Jenny Block, the Senior Chaplain of BaptistCare, and you're listening to Focus on the Family Australia. Well, prior to the break, we spoke about chaplains and how important they are, but it's so diverse. There's a whole variety of different things, and we can't cover them all, but I want to dig a little deeper on, how do you come across someone and the role of maybe end of life, how you support them in that journey, and maybe how to help plan those things. Can you explain, or even in your own experiences, what you've done?
Yeah, it's such a privilege at this space. I was working in the aged care space, so they're all imminently going to die quite soon. And what is amazing now is so many of our people here in Australia are not connected to churches. So therefore, when it's coming to death and funerals, they have got no idea who's going to do their funeral. And so suddenly they've built a relationship with a chaplain, and they're saying to the chaplain, will you do my funeral?
Wow.
So it opens up that whole conversation of not only their funeral, but how they would like to die. And do you need to be speaking to any of your family members? What do you need to close before this time comes? So it's a really deep time. It's great conversations that you have, and it's such a privilege. I would hate to think how many people's wills I'm in to do their funeral. They would say that to me, I'm going to put it in my will, you have to come back and do my funeral. And just because I had built relationship, the other part of it is then supporting their families. So because they're going through this grief and loss, they don't have the support of a church community or a faith community, whatever that looks like.
We can take that
them.
for many of our listeners. They take that for granted, but there's many people who don't have that.
No.
And even people who have got a faith, they've lost their community for whatever reason.
They have. And of course, in this stage too, where people are struggling with even as Christians, struggling with church, so they have stepped out of church. So to have this chaplain that knows how to do a church service, knows then how to do a funeral as well, and then we support them then during the funeral, after the funeral, through this grief and loss that they're going through.
So what is probably the biggest thing that you help them work through?
That's a really good question, Kate.
I've taught her well.
You have. The biggest thing, I think it's giving them permission to say goodbye, that it's okay to let go. So many of them, mum is unconscious, mum's not feeding, she's not eating anymore, and they're just wanting, if we could wake her up, give her a cup of tea, she'll be okay, that type of thinking.
Yeah.
But it's like saying, no, mum's, her body is shutting down, and just sitting with them and talking that through with them and getting them to be able to lean in to mum or lean into dad and be there with them to the end. When I'm able to do that journey with a family member, it's just delightful to see that. Yeah.
If they have unresolved relationships, which I believe a
There's
lot
many.
of them do, do you then sit and mediate with them, or how does that happen?
Depends on the family whether they want me to or not.
Yeah.
I've actually had to go in and separate families in rooms and tell one
that's
half
not
of the
ideal.
family to sit in one room and another in the lounge room, and then have you've got 5 minutes with mum and out type of thing. So, every family is very different. So it really does depend on what's happening in the family. But just having someone else in the room can make all the difference.
Yes.
And you'd be surprised that even families that aren't Christians, but I've built this relationship that I can even say, would you like me to pray? And they will want me to pray. They will want me to say the 23rd Psalm.
Yeah.
And that's bringing God into the room, which is really amazing. And I've seen the calm come into the room and where they are able to take mum's hand
So good.
and give her a kiss on the forehead, say, I love you, mum, the apologies or whatever that needs to be done. Other families, it can be completely different.
The healing is enormous when that happens.
Very much so.
You mentioned not the end of life, but the loss and grief of a vibrant, healthy individual whose body starts decaying or deteriorating. That's a loss and grief in itself. They can't be as mobile. They can't be as agile as they used to be. Their thinking is not quite right. How do you help someone going through that loss and grief?
Look, families that have got mum or dad that are living with dementia is a major part of our role as well.
Right.
And I went through it myself personally with my mum.
Oh, that's hard road.
She was living with dementia for at least 15 years. That really was a benefit as a chaplain because I had been through it as well.
Well, nothing's ever wasted, is it, that we walk through?
No, it's not.
And I feel like God brings things across our path because he's going to use it.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So it was more just once again sitting with the daughter, sitting with the son and listening to the grief, the things that they had lost, that mum can't talk to me, mum doesn't recognise me. I just miss mum so much. But also trying to encourage them that, mum is still there. There is still an emotion happening. So even though they don't recognise you, if you go up and hold their hand or talk to them or sing with them, an emotion is going to be there. And what greater gift can we give a loved one than leave them with a sense of feeling loved and recognised and heard or whatever that is. So, that was always a privilege to be able to do that work as well in the dementia space.
It's so personal. What you get to do is so personal and so beautiful. People in their most vulnerable moments have somebody who's just there for them.
What I used to love doing mostly was singing to them. And, of course, all of them had been in Sunday school. So, oh, my
songs.
gosh, Jesus loves me.
Yeah.
Yes.
You sing Jesus loves me. You sing what a friend we have in Jesus, an amazing grace. And the brain cells, things would start happening in their brain, and you may get a good 10, 15 minutes of good conversation with them.
Quite lucid. Yeah. There'd be some people here saying, well, I'd like to do this type of role. This suits me. Do you have volunteers or a requirement of volunteers?
We do. We have pastoral care volunteers.
And that will be throughout the whole nation. It's not just in BaptistCare, but other organisations similar to yours would be
have it. Very
open
much
to
so.
having this type of role.
Very much so. Go and see your aged care provider down the road. Go and knock on the door and say, do you have volunteers?
Yeah.
And particularly churches. Before I got into chaplaincy, our church was going to an aged care home that was not faith-based, and they were very welcoming for us to go in and do a church service. But just to go in and walk around and sit and talk to people.
Yeah,
what
it's
a privilege.
your presence, isn't it? It's your presence.
We had an auntie who was in care who had dementia, and one of my sons is a pianist, musician. And so I said to him, why don't we go down and you play all the old hymns and stuff? And they loved that. And it was such a beautiful time for them to reconnect, because you see them light up because all of a sudden it's something they recognise and that touched them. But on that note, if I'm a daughter and I'm far away from where my parent is and I'm listening to this and I'm going, my mum or my dad need that, how do they go about getting that? You're talking about going personally into someone's home if they are still living at home, but they really could do with some of a chaplain coming in and just being a special person there. How do we go about organising that?
It's not easy, but look, can I encourage you to ring up your aged care provider and ask, do they have chaplaincy? Do they have spiritual care, pastoral care? We come under many titles.
Yeah.
Ring up and find out if they do have that service. If they do, then you can request whether somebody could go and see mum or dad. Ring up and see if mum and dad want somebody.
Yeah,
because it is up
never
to
assume.
them.
Yeah,
Never assume, definitely. If they don't have that service, you can start putting a little bit of pressure on them.
Yeah.
Also,
Be the change.
without a doubt. And the government doesn't want to pay for us either. Aged care is expensive, of course.
Yes.
But we need to be putting a little bit of pressure on the government to be paying.
Because there'll be some that will say it's not good value, but it's actually giving dignity to all people.
Yes.
Look, I used to say that chaplaincy was like the sprinkles on the cake. Well, I've completely changed my attitude that I believe it's the foundation
Totally
of organisation.
Yes.
And it is so important to have people with that skill set, people that are trained in pastoral care, to be able to sit with people and be present. Spiritual well-being, I love the meaning is about connection. So it's connecting with self. So having somebody there to help you connect with yourself, to understand what's happening within me. Like there's times where, like the other day, I just wasn't feeling good in myself. I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
In fact, all I wanted to do was curl up and have a cry. What was going on?
Yeah.
So then I was able to sit, and it was actually with my daughter, and she asked some really good questions that made me go, that's what's going on with me. So therefore I was able to work it through and come out of that. So I was able to connect with myself. Of course, it's connecting with others. So these people that are lonely, they need to have people coming in. In the aged care, our carers are so busy.
Yes.
So they're racing in, doing the work. They're trying to connect with their residents, but they are so busy. So to have somebody that goes in that is not busy, that looks like they've got all the time in the world. They don't because they have got so many people to get around, but to just have that non-anxious presence.
Quality and quantity of time. Yeah.
It's a very interesting phase of life where they can feel like, everyone's forgotten me.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
My family's busy. My grandchildren are busy. Everybody's busy.
And even their churches have forgotten them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially if they can't get there because of transport or whatever it is, or they're just not well enough, or, churches can be loud.
That's exactly right.
Yes, they don't do well in that kind of noise situation. And so to have a chaplain coming in and reminding them that they're not forgotten.
I think that we need to do another conversation on that, just caring for elderly parents. And
yes.
Would you be happy to come back for another chat?
I certainly would be.
Excellent, excellent. This has been such a rich conversation, and we really appreciate your time. And if you'd like to find out more information, you can go to your local aged care provider and find out more details about how you can get involved.
Definitely.
Well, thank you, Jenny. Our guest today was Jenny Block, the General Manager of Chaplaincy and Spiritual Care at BaptistCare in Sydney. And we at Focus on the Family have a number of resources on caring for elderly parents on our website. And you can visit families.org.au. And thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Kate and myself, Brett Ryan, we'd like to invite you to tune in for another edition of Focus on the Family, Australia.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.